joining us today at the Tahara Collective. Today we are going to be talking about the Islamic perspective to dealing with grief and loss. And we have with us two very special panelists, one of which is Mr. Jubril Saba. Mr. Saba is a regular here, and we are very happy to have him talk about the Islamic fiqh perspective on how to deal with grief, when you're grieving or when you have suffered any form of loss. We also have with us Mrs. Ghaneeyyah Sulaiman-Olokodana. Mrs. Sulaiman-Olokodana is a clinical psychologist and marital counseling expert. She will be speaking with us from the psychological perspective. You're both very welcome. This webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available on YouTube and via email, inshallah. So, Mr. Jubril, would you like to take the floor? Thank you very much.
Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, 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 lakal hamdu wa tatarda, wa lakal hamdu iza ma radait, wa lakal hamdu ba'da rida, wa lakal hamdu abadan abadan abadan. Qala rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli, amma ba'd. Dear brothers and sisters, we give thanks to Almighty Allah, the fashioner, the originator of all things, the controller of all affairs, the one on whose will all action is possible, and with whose leave all conditions are brought about. The one with whose permission misfortunes happen. He guides the heart of anyone who believes in him, and he is well aware of all things. He is the one to whom we turn to with all our acts of obedience, in obedience to his dictates and those of his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask that he inspires us to action that increases us in faith and purify our iman and fortify our iman and help us to put our trust in him completely. I want to thank the organizers for putting together this program and for deeming it fit to invite me. I'm indeed grateful to be here. I'm doubly excited because I'm sharing the space with my sister, Ghaneeyyah-Olokodana, whom I respect a great deal. I don't think we give enough credit to the work that she does, and I'm looking forward to hearing from her later in a bit. I've been given 30 minutes. I want to thank my sister Sophia for the introduction. Just a little caveat, I am not a faqih. I am not sure I can do justice to this topic from the point of view of fiqh. But inshallah, with the little that Allah has blessed us with in the knowledge, we will try to share what we have learned over time, helping people through difficult situations as an imam, be it a death, a loss of other forms of material things in property, where people feel they've fallen short of the mark, expectations that they've set for themselves. So I'll be trying to use some practical examples from that to speak to this topic. Surely grief, sorrow, trauma, loss, etc. These are some of the biggest trials of faith. They can destabilize you. They can throw your entire world upside down. The Prophet ﷺ had a dua which he would say to combat anxiety, and we see this in Sahih Muslim. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from anxiety and sorrow, weakness and laziness, miserliness and cowardice, and the burden of death, and from being overpowered by men. Allahumma ameen. There is no better time for us to talk about this subject than now, mainly because we are all emerging from the shadows of a truly remarkable event, a once-in-a-lifetime trial. And just as we're about to, heave a collective sigh of relief, we're besieged with news of a new wave in lands not too far from us, in the last 6-7 months, a lot of us would have been faced with news of loss of our friends, family, means of livelihood, businesses, health. Some people's health has suffered. Most times we're clueless in the face of dealing with those going through a particularly difficult time. Sometimes we ourselves are immobilized by the event if we're experiencing it personally or vicariously through another person's experience. We are sometimes like leaky containers. We can't contain our emotions, we can't contain our anxieties, and we are therefore unable to hold the space for the one that is grieving or the person that has just experienced a traumatic event. And in most instances, sometimes our intervention can create a much bigger problem because we, as people who are trying to help, haven't fully dealt with our own inner world and the sort of like psychological impact of having to care for another, of having to be there for another, where we're not the ones personally affected. And this is particularly problematic for those of us that find ourselves to be in the line of dawah, in a position of leadership in the community as spiritual guides. There's the tendency for us to put up a social defense that pushes us to the extreme of just speaking about what the scripture says without putting in the right context that might help us be more emotionally available to the person who is grieving. And this is largely because sometimes we conflate the meaning of grief and mourning. And I'll come to that in a bit to answer the question, as Muslims, are we allowed to grieve? I remember a while ago, something I found very helpful. I mean, when I was doing my executive coaching training, there were these 5 remembrances which we were encouraged to reflect on daily to help us get in touch with what you call human suffering. I've since moved away from that because I found something even better in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But I'm going to share both because they have very striking similarities. The 5 remembrance go thus: I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no escaping ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. And we were encouraged then to reflect on this almost like every morning and just do some kind of free associative writing based on what comes to our mind immediately after reflecting on this 5 remembrances. And what it does for you is to really bring you down to the level where you are in touch with what is real, the rawness of the emotion of being separated from the ones we love, from the things we love, which tend to be the source of all grieving, of all sorrow, of all trauma. But I found something even better in a hadith collected and reported to us by Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, on the authority of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. It's usually called the hadith of gratitude, 5 before 5. The Prophet sallallahu says to take advantage of 5 before 5. Take advantage of your youth before your old age. Take advantage of your health before your illness. Take advantage of your riches before poverty sets in. Take advantage of your free time before your work. Take advantage of your life before your death. And reflecting on these as often as possible, help us come to terms with the reality that loss, diminishing, coming to an end, impermanence is a feature of the dunya. It's something that would happen to you regardless of who you are, where you're from, what your socioeconomic standing is. You will experience multiple of these things. And then what do? What do you do in such a situation? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to us that surely he will test us with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and lives and crops. And he says to give glad tidings to those who are steadfast, who say when misfortune strikes them, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To him Allah we belong, and to him we shall return. In Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 2, verse 155 to 157, he concludes by saying, these are the ones on whom are blessings from their Lord and mercy, and it is they who are the guided ones. So that will be tried with some form of loss is a given. What then must a Muslim do in the face of this? Separation anxiety is something that we are born with. It's inherent in us. In Surah Al-Mu'min, Allah describes the placement when we were in our mother's wombs. He described the placement of the fetus in a place he called Qararin Makinin, a secure place. And the minute we become detached from that attachment and we're born into the world, we experience consistent separation anxiety. And the reason why grieving is so debilitating is because it is almost always accompanied by an overwhelming sense of annihilation, of loneliness, of abandonment, of rejection, of separation. It is said, for instance, that the death of a mother is the first sorrow wept without her. And there's something my late father used to say consistently to me, which I later found out to be a hadith reported by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He would say, look, aksaru zikra azimil lazat, yani al-maut. Frequently remember the destroyer of pleasures, meaning death, because this reality will come to us all without leaving or sparing a single soul or a single person. Why is grieving so hard? Why is it something that is so difficult for us to contend with, to deal with, both for the person going through the trauma personally and those of us around them? It's because as human beings, we're wired on the one hand to survive. We have a deep instinct to perpetuate ourselves, to survive, to not put ourselves in harm's way. But on the other hand, we have a very clear sense that nothing on this plane is permanent. And we are reminded from time to time through the loss of wealth, through the loss of property, through the loss of lives. And between those two extremes sits the death anxiety. And that is what grips us. That is what prevents us from being able to move forward. It debilitates us. It disempowers us in the midst of grieving, to the extent that it shakes our faith. And some people begin to question their faith. They take on things like self-blame, you know, believing that whatever the situation is, they must have brought it about upon themselves. Or on the other extreme, where they curse their luck, they blame their Lord for bringing them to this state of wretchedness, thinking, for instance, that he has abandoned them, or that some action of theirs has earned them this calamity. And then they get into this thing around guilt and shame, which I really don't want to spend too much time talking about. If it comes up in the Q&A, of course, I'll try to spend a bit of time on that. So as Muslims, are we allowed to grieve? And in researching this topic for today, I had a very good companion, and I'm just going to hold this up if you can see it. It's called A Gift for the Bereaved Parent, written by Zamir Hussain, A Remedy for Grief from the Islamic Perspective, using quotes from the Quran and the Hadith. Zamir Hussain is a Muslim chaplain. It's a female in a hospital in the UK. It's a 56-page book that I find very useful, particularly when we're going to go and pay like condolence visits to people who've been bereaved, because there's some very good reminders in there. And the first of them, you know, is a letter from from the Prophet ﷺ to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, radiallahu anhu, one of the Sahaba at the time, upon the death of Mu'adh's son, the Prophet ﷺ wrote him a letter. And in this letter, we find all the lessons that we should take from an Islamic perspective when we're struck by calamity that puts us in a state of grieving. He says, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. May Allah be with you. May peace of Allah be with you. I praise Allah. There is no God, only Allah. May Allah increase your reward and calm your sad heart and give you guidance and power to thank Him. Indeed, our lives, our families, and our property are gifts entrusted to us only for a fixed time. The duty of man, therefore, is to thank Allah when He bestows on him a gift and to endure with patience when He takes it back. Your son was a special trust from Allah. He blessed you with him till He desired and took him away from you in return for a great reward. O Mu'adh, do not let complaining and impatience destroy your reward, or you shall surely regret this later on. If you knew how much return and recompense has been granted to you for it, then you would surely be amazed at Allah's mercy. The promise which Allah has made to the people who endure misfortune and pain with patience shall be fully fulfilled in the life to come. The promise of Allah should reduce your grief. Whatever is destined to take place must occur. May you be in peace. Allah's Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in this, we see the key lessons that we need to take, the stance we need to take when we're faced with a traumatic episode where we find ourselves in a situation where we're grieving. The first of them, and I pray that Almighty Allah grants this to all of us, is ihtisab. Ihtisab is the belief without doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would compensate and reward you for any discomfort, no matter how large or small. The hadith, the books of hadith are replete with the reward for people who lose children through miscarriages, when they're young, who lose their husbands and wives, their fathers and mothers, provided that they were righteous people. And also we know, and I'll come to that in a bit, the things we can do so that they continually benefit from those actions even after they're gone. The second that we must pray that Allah grants us, and we learn from this letter, is istirja. Knowing that only Allah is the creator and sustainer and everything belongs to Him. And anything He grants to us is a trust from Him. Istirja is the belief in inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. That from Him, to Him everything belongs, and unto Him everything will return. And the third is rida, contentment. The awareness that the peak of spiritual status, which we are all struggling to attain, is to be content with Allah's decree, Allah's will, and wisdom in all circumstances. You see in Surah Al-Rajj, chapter 13 of the Holy Quran, verse 28, where Allah says that truly in the remembrance of Him do the hearts find peace. So the station of Ridda is something that we all strive towards. May Almighty Allah hasten our achievement of that status. But it's only in the constant remembrance of Allah that we will get there. Then there is sabr, forbearance. May Allah bless us with a beautiful patience and bring a stillness and serenity to our hearts in our times of trouble, and to the hearts of those whose love and care surround us at those times, and to those who also share in our grief. Forbearing when Allah's decree as judgment has come upon us is not something that is easy. It's easy to talk about, but for the recipient, it's not something they're looking to hear at that time. And this is why the work of the Muslim is to prepare for this eventuality by constant remembrance of Allah. Because at the time when the calamity happens, subhanallah, sometimes by then it's too late. The person just has to be allowed to go through what they need to go through, and we pray that they emerge stronger from it. But the time to prepare for war, like they say, is at the time of peace. So when I am not suffering any separation from my loved ones, when I'm not suffering any loss in my property, in my work, in my business, that's the time to constantly remember Allah, and to remember also that a time would come when I will be tested. Allah says in Surah Al-Rahman, everything that was created is racing towards its end, and nothing of that which is created would remain. So understanding all of this helps us to prepare and fortify us. But that's not to say when the incident happens, we will still not feel disempowered. We would have to forbear. And may Almighty Allah grant us the forbearance at such a time. And then compassion. May Almighty Allah make us a source of mercy to others and ease their sorrow and our sorrow in the remembrance of those who also suffer. May He open our hearts to the plight of others. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever makes things easy for others in this world, Allah will make things easy for him both in this world and in the hereafter. And Allah helps His servant as long as His servant is engaged in helping his brother. But how do we help our brother? How do we help our sister when they're going through a traumatic event? Is it enough to say to them, it's enough, take heart, fear Allah, do not go extreme in your mourning? As a way of speech, yes, that's a good thing to say, but in practical reality, is it useful to this person? Let's look at the inner world of the person that is grieving. At the very best, healthy grieving is about taking stock of what would never be the same again. And please remember that grieving is an internal process. When it's externalized, then that's mourning, And in Islam, and this is why I say sometimes people conflict mourning and grieving, that are we allowed to grieve? Of course we're allowed to grieve. Is there a timeline for grieving? No, because over time, as we remember, events will happen in future, certain things will happen that will cause us to remember, and the heart again would render, and then we would feel some sorrow. And that's the time when we must turn to Allah to provide us succor. But mourning, however, is something that is time-bound in Islam. It's for 3 days for everybody else except the wife of someone who's diseased, who is someone that has to spend time in Iddah, and they're meant to mourn their husband for 4 months and 10 days. That is something of which there is no ambiguity. So after 3 days, mourning is done. The external form of ridding ourselves of the anxiety of the fact that somebody is no more. That's 3 days. But grieving, which is the internal process, that sense of being overwhelmed and overloaded with a sense of pain and loss, that is something that goes on almost forever. Unresolved grief, on the other hand, tends to close the hearts down. May Almighty Allah open up our hearts. And although we try to console a person, we really can never feel another person's grief. A person who is grieving goes into a depressive state, meaning it's difficult for them to think about or plan for the future. So saying to the person repeatedly that don't worry, what is in store for you and what is to come is not particularly helpful, because this person, and I don't know if my sister will talk about this, but we can talk about this in the Q&A, their connection with their executive function is severely restricted. So the ability to plan for the future is severely limited by the grief. The interest in the external world has been diminished, and planning for the future is put on hold. So for Muslims, we must really plan for this reality before it hits. And what are some of the azkar that we can say? And I'll close this in the next 5 to 10 minutes, as I don't have too much time. In the Holy Quran, Almighty Allah teaches us a few words of remembrance. We can go to Surah Al-Ashura, and these are the things that we must constantly maybe try to integrate into our daily prayer, our daily azkar, because by reminding ourselves of these things, we are fortified. against the debilitating effects of grieving. It's not that we would not feel it, we will feel it, but inshallah, we will be able to cycle out of it a lot faster. The first one I would like to share with you today is from Surah Al-Ashura, chapter 42 of the Holy Quran in verse 19. You would find a statement, Allahu latifu bi ba'di, yarzuqu man yasha'u wa huwa qawiyyul aziz. Allahu latifu bi ba'di. Allah is subtle towards his servants. Yarzuqu man yasha'u, he is constantly providing for them as he wills. He's taking away from you, he's adding onto you, is all part of his divine decree of providing. You know, Allah is all powerful and is almighty. In Surah Al-Ghafir, chapter 40 of the Holy Quran, in verse 44, we find the statement, "Ufawidu amriya ilallah, inna Allah basiru bil ibadi." I commit my affairs to Almighty Allah's hands. Inna Allah basiru bil ibadi. Allah is well aware of the condition of all his ibad, of all his servants. In Surah Al-Hud, chapter 11 of the Holy Quran, verse 88, we find the reminder of Nabi Shuaib, alayhi salam, وَمَا تَوْفِيكِ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَإِلَيْهِ يُنِيبُ. That we cannot succeed. I cannot succeed. I cannot attain tawfiq without Allah's help. I trust him and always turn to him. In Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3 of the Holy Quran, verse 173, there's the popular one, Hasbunallahi wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is enough for us. He is the best wakil, is the best of protectors. And finally, in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 214, we find the statement, because this is something that has to do with some people who were with their messenger at the time, and they cried out of despair, Matay Nasrullah, when will the help of Allah come? And Allah says, Allah, inna nasrallahi qaribun, that definitely, truly, Allah's help is near. It's next to you, even as you speak. The prophets grieved. You would read in the surah in the story of Yusuf, his father Yaqub, in chapter 12 of the Holy Quran, 84 to 86. So pained, so grievous was his pain when he was told of the death of his son by wolves, even though he did not believe it. You know, the Quran says that his eyes turned white. He went blind with grief. In Surah Al-Qamar, chapter 10, in verse 10 of the Holy Quran, you would find, Qamar verse 10, you'll find that when Prophet Nuh exclaimed in despair, and he said, if I can find the reference now, I'll probably try and come back to that. Okay, here it is. And he said, my Lord, indeed I am overcome, so please help me. I've read to you the letter from the Prophet ﷺ to Mu'adh when he lost his son. The Prophet ﷺ, when Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, when Ibrahim, his son, subhanallah, when Ibrahim, his son, was in the throes, in the grips of death, it was said that he had tears running down his eyes, and the companions asked him, but what is this? You know, this shedding of tears. And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is mercy, which Allah has placed on the hearts of his servants. And indeed, it is only the merciful of his servants that Allah gives mercy. So it is okay to cry. It's a cathartic experience that helps to get rid of some of the anxiety, especially when you're moved to a particular point where you shed tears. His own daughter, Zainab, radiallahu anha, lost a child. And as the child was dying, the Prophet ﷺ said to her, whoever Allah takes is his, and whatever he gives is his. And to all things, he has appointed a time to have patience and be rewarded. So this was the 5 more minutes. Thank you very much. This was the position of the prophets, the position of people who were close to them. So we see that grieving is a natural part of living in this dunya. And inshallah, as I yield the space to my sister, if I get a chance to come back and speak again, there are a few dua that I want to share from the hadith, where we are taught by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu of the prayers, of the things to say when we're in distress, when we're grieving. And I think there are about 2 or 3 of them that I would love to share. May Almighty Allah grant us time to be able to discuss this. And when we come back as well, we might, if it comes up in the Q&A, that's great. If it doesn't, I'll still want to talk about it. Visiting the graveside. Can women visit the graveside? What is excessive mourning? What isn't? And what is the Islamic perspective on this? Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamu ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Jazakumullahu khairan. We look forward to the Q&A session so that you can give us more information that you have just promised to share with us. It's very nice to know that grieving is indeed a natural process of life, and we as Muslims, just like any part of living, have to follow the prescribed way to grieve. And now for the second part of our session, I would like to welcome Mrs. Ghaneeyyah Sulaiman-Olokodana to give us the psychological perspective, inshallah. I would also like to announce to our dear attendees that you can put your questions in the Q&A box so that immediately after this session, we will go right to them, inshallah. Bismillah.
Jazakallah khairan, my sister. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Once again, I'm so happy and privileged to be here. It's indeed always a pleasure for me to speak to us on topics that are mundane, topics that are relevant, not just to us as Muslims, but to us as human beings. So once again, I appreciate the organizers for inviting me, and again allowing me to share the stage with my with my brother Imam and Ustaz. Alhamdulillah, he has spoken to us briefly about the Islamic perspective of loss, grief, and trauma, and I will just like to look at it from the psychological perspective, more because that is my first area of competence as a trained clinical psychologist. And indeed, with the loss that the whole world has been feeling, as a counselor, I have seen increased requests in the number of people that seek help, because these are indeed trying times. A lot of people, whether individually or collectively, we are all, going through one form of loss or the other. So it's important that, we also remind ourselves again how to deal with issues like this, because it doesn't seem like it's relent that we learn how to prepare ahead for whatever is coming. And as Muslims, that is even the best way to do that. So just quickly, I will try to define the terms and try to bring them together, because, again, like my brother said, there's a slight difference between, grieving and mourning. And so it's important for us to understand these terms when we put them in the proper perspective. A loss is, simply when we lose something or someone that we love very much, that was dear to us, that was of importance to us. And grieving is simply that natural, the kind of emotional suffering that we go through when we suffer a trauma. So putting all this into perspective, we can say that a loss is considered traumatic if it occurs without warning, if it involves some form of violence or significant damage, and sometimes when it's also considered preventable. Some people also like to add that, death, for instance, most times when people die, when people that are close to us die, and but of course we know that as Muslims, everything does not happen unless Allah has decreed so. So we cannot, as Muslims, say that, oh, this loss is untimely, this loss is could have been avoided. We know that everything happens according to Allah's will. But that doesn't change the fact that we feel that loss, and we need to grieve about it, and we need to do it in a way that is healthy. So what happens is that when someone experiences what we now call a traumatic, it's like a double tragedy, their challenges become twofold. One, they cope with the trauma. And then the second is that they have to also cope with their grief. So how then do we, cope with grief and loss, particularly as Muslims? Whether the loss is a healthy ways that we can deal with that grieving process. Every loss, no matter how small, no matter how significant, is one of life's biggest challenges, particularly the death of a loved one. Even sometimes not even as serious, in quotes, as death. We all suffer losses in a lot of ways. And because these are things that are subjective to each and every one of us, we can't say that, oh, your loss is small, why are you still grieving? No, it's a personal thing, and how each individual chooses to experience it, there's no right or wrong way to do that, but we can just try our best to do so in healthy ways. There are different types of losses, and I'll just quickly mention some of them. Sometimes a relationship that has gone bad, or even a divorce, is a loss to some people. The loss of our health, significantly. Maybe for some people is, not enjoying optimal health, that they have to keep going in and out of the hospital. They can't do certain things that they used to do before. Or they lose certain body parts that, is a constant, and there's a constant reminder. For instance, maybe somebody, because they suffer from a wound that refused to, so they now have to cut off their leg or the parts that the wound that didn't heal was. So, that's the loss of that body part is a constant reminder, because they are seeing that missing part. They are seeing where it should be, and it will be a continuous source of loss. For some people, it's losing a job. They are used to a certain lifestyle, and they're suddenly out of a job. They can't maintain that standard of living again. Some, they don't necessarily lose a job, but they lose that financial, how bad things have been since this COVID period. People, even though some people are working, but the reality is that they are not earning as much as. Sometimes the loss can be in form of a miscarriage of a child that a person was carrying, or even stillbirth. So you've had the child, but the child died at birth. Some people, it's retiring. They've worked for 25, 30 years upwards, and suddenly they retire. They feel that sense of loss of going to work every day, of doing something, like routine every day for such a long time, that it can bring about, a certain sense of loss. For some, it can be, a sense of a loss of their friendship, particularly when, such friendship was, such loss was maybe as a result of betrayal or something like that. Sometimes we lose because of our homes, either from moving or from changing, like I said earlier, a change in lifestyle and all that. And, even something like a cherished dream, dreams that we couldn't achieve, a dream that we couldn't bring to fruition, can also bring about a lot of human individuals who in the past 5 years, maybe in another town, and they graduate. So coming back to where they normally live, they feel that sense of loss of leaving the school environment, the school community, the friendship, and taking time to realize this is when we don't acknowledge them. In later years, most times when people come in for counseling, and we begin to dig deep into the reasons for the issues they are going through, we find that things like this are sometimes the cause. And because they didn't even understand it then, so they were not able to process it, they were not able to grieve properly. Somebody comes back from school and, is feeling a bit sad, and people be like, oh, come on, shake it off. Don't you know that you have to move on to the next chapter in your life? Be a man, be a woman, you should get over it. you're supposed to concentrate on getting a good job now, getting married and all that. So they don't allow the person to go through the natural grieving process. And so it becomes something that always holds that person back if it is neither allowed to naturally extinguish itself. So again, like I said, grief is a process that is highly individualized. So we can afford to be subjective about it. And how we grieve as individuals would depend on a number of factors, which can include our personality, the kind of person that we are. You know, sometimes these personality differences determine how well or how badly some of us would go through the grieving process. Our life experiences, what has life dealt us? What kind of card has life dealt us, whether good or bad? Our coping styles, you know, even our faith. More importantly, our faith also helps us in the grieving process. And alhamdulillah, my brother has, you know, briefly touched about, you know, how Islam, you know, what Islam sees grieving as, and how we can learn to, you know, to grieve from the Islamic perspective. And also, of course, how significant that loss was to us would also determine, you know, how we grieve about it. But again, that is subjective. A person could lose their spouse of 20, 30 years, somebody they loved very much, and perhaps because of their personality or their understanding of their faith, they are able to cope with it better than another person. So we see that, you know, it's usually a marriage of a lot of factors that would help us to grieve in healthy ways. Quickly, I'll try to look at, you know, the 5 stages of grief that we have, that we can, you know, to help us have a better understanding of what grieving is all about. The first stage is usually that first thing that mostly is also saying, oh, the death of a loved one. We don't believe that. We want to believe that that person hasn't died. Oh, maybe they are still sleeping. In fact, some people will be looking at the dead body and be like, oh yeah, Lagbaja, wake up now, wake up. You can't leave me, you know, particularly if it's a spouse or a parent or a child, you know. We'll first go into denial. Then the next stage is that we become angry and say, why is this happening? Why me? You know, and sometimes because maybe a series of such events have happened to us, we may tend to want to question God. You know, it shakes our faith. We'll be like, why is it only me that, you know, bad things happen to? You know, as you guys will say, you know, things like that. We start to, you know, if we're not careful, we may begin to say things that we shouldn't say, particularly as Muslims. And then the third stage is that we want to bargain, you know, when we are slowly coming to terms that, oh, this thing is like it's true. We want to bargain, we'll be like, oh God, please don't let this be true. Please just change this situation for me. You know, just bring them back. You know, we just begin to, you know, we want to bargain with God that Allah should change that situation for us. Sometimes we even want to make a promise that, oh Allah, if you do this thing for me, you know, I will do this in return. But when we see that, of course, whatever we have lost cannot come back. The next stage is that we may likely fall into depression. You know, symptoms that can either be emotional or physical. And, you know, that's when, you know, we are just looking. We become mechanical about the things that we do, you know, in the next coming days or weeks or months, depending on how long, you know, the grieving takes us, and acceptance. And hopefully, if we're able to go through that grieving process very well in a healthy manner, then inshallah, we'll be able to, you know, come to peace with whatever it is that has happened to us. Now, this stage, they may not sometimes even follow each other, you know, in this same process. Sometimes we experience one and all or some at the same time. But whatever it is, sometimes we are even also able to go through these things without any help. But more importantly, it's also important that we seek support whenever we experience such. is not necessarily a show of, you know, manliness, as they say, you know, to be bold, to want to hold it in. Sometimes we need to let out, you know, whatever it is that is causing us pain. Whether we need to cry, whether we need to, you know, do something that would, you know, bring out the pain that we are feeling. And again, these are some of the symptoms that we may feel. I'll break them down into emotional symptoms of grief, which would include, you know, that sense of shock and disbelief. We also feel a bit of sadness. We may even feel guilty. And of course, anger, which is already, you know, one of the stages of grief that we go through. Another emotional symptom is fear. And this fear can become so bad that it becomes debilitating. You know, the fear, particularly, for instance, if somebody, maybe we lost a child, you know, and we have more than one, we begin, you know, if a sense of fear can so overcome us that, you know, we become overprotective of the other children. Maybe the child that died, maybe somehow we sent them out on an errand and a car, God forbid, hits them and, you know, the loss happened. So we become so overprotective. We don't want the other children out of our sight. We don't want them going out, you know, to do anything. So because we will be so fearful that, you know, what that loss would repeat itself. And of course, when we feel all these emotional symptoms, they would also lead us to experience actual physical symptoms of grief, which can, you know, include fatigue. I mean, somebody that is always fearful will become tensed up. Somebody that is, you know, experiencing anger, you know, shock, it will translate to physical symptoms as fatigue. We are so tired because we are using up a lot of our emotional energy. Some people actually feel sick physically. They feel nauseated by that sense of loss, that they could actually throw up, you know, vomit, be ill, and some would even, you know, land in the hospital and all that. Some faint, you know, out of the pain and loss that they're experiencing. And when these things happen, of course, because our bodies are not in the right frame, our immunity is lowered. So we become more susceptible to illnesses, you know, things like that, little things. So usually you'd see that somebody that is suffering a loss, that is grieving, would become ill, you know, quicker. The person may, you know, suffer malaria, you know, dysentery, you know, going to the toilet, all sorts of things, because our immunity is lowered. And of course, the person, as a result, could either gain weight or lose weight. Some people, you know, they cope with their grief either by, you know, just eating everything in sight. Food is a form of comfort for them. So as a result, they will gain weight. Or because they are not even doing anything, they are just sitting down morning till night, moping, you know, they're not doing any form of exercise. So they could also gain weight. And for some, they may not eat anything. So of course, they would lose weight. And that sense of grief, like I said, even though it's psychological, you feel pain, you feel ache, you know, in your heart. And this can also translate to you know, body pain and all that. And of course, some people, alongside that grief, would also come what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly if the person suffering the grief was a survivor of what caused the loss. Maybe it was an accident, they were both in the car, and then the spouse died or the child died and they survived. So having to relive that memory, that experience over and over again can cause, you know, them to be unable to sleep. How do we cope with grief, particularly as Muslims? And, you know, my brother had touched briefly on it. But I would also like to point out that we can turn to our friends and family members. Indeed, Islam as a religion, we know it's a communal, everything in Islam is communal. So when people die, whether we know them or not, in fact, I think, you know, going to greet somebody at a time of grief is one of the rights of our brothers over us, you know, our brothers and sisters. So whenever we hear that somebody has lost a loved one, it's our religious duty to go and, you know, greet them, to offer them that comfort, offer solace, pray for them, if possible, you know, take to them that would help them go through that process properly. So it's important that we know that this is also something that we can do to help people cope with the grief that they are dealing with. Of course, as Muslims, it's also important that we learn to draw comfort from our faith. Indeed, Islam is a religion of reality. It has dealt with every aspect of our life, and we'll be doing ourselves to the source of our faith and look at these things. I mean, what my brother said, people have written books, they have done research, they have conducted studies on these things. Sometimes all we just need to do is just search, and then we'll find out, oh, there's an Islamic perspective to how we deal with with things like this. And like the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu has told us, Islam offers the better option. So whatever we need to deal with is always join a support group. Nowadays, I mean, the world is in a global village. We see that people are coming up with ways to support people that are suffering grief. So these things have become so specialized that you are not the only one going through it. You can come together with other people that have either experienced such loss in their own lives too, or are currently doing so, and then you can share your loss, you can share that problem, and you find out that sometimes just knowing that you're not the only one going through it is not peculiar to just you. And, like my brother said, Allah has told us that He will test us in a lot of ways. Indeed, the Prophet of Islam, I mean, has given us so many examples in that regard. There is hardly any kind of loss that we can think about that the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not go through. So we already have like a model. Oh, how did the Prophet, go through this? We can learn about it. And sometimes these things is even better to try to learn about how to cope before it actually happens to us. As Muslims, we are realistic people. We are not going to deny ourselves and say, oh, we never suffer loss of either as a result of death or even maybe loss of our property, loss of things and people that we value. So is a good way to cope is to prepare ahead, to have a better understanding. Oh, if my husband dies, I can't even say God forbid, because my husband will die someday. And if Allah has decreed that he's going to die before me, then what am I expected to do as the wife? How long am I expected to, mourn him for? How should I grieve over him? So that at the end of the day, I don't also cause myself more harm, because if man dies before me, maybe our children will still be alive. So I also need to stay healthy, to stay alive, to support them. I'll still have family members that, just, they'll still be thankful that, oh, thank God, at least it was just one parent that died. The other one is still alive. So we need to learn about these things before they happen sometimes, so that we know how best to deal with them. Of course, we can also learn to talk to a therapist, or what we call a grief counselor. Like I mentioned earlier, since COVID-19, I've had increased requests of people, calling to seek counseling, to seek help, because they've suddenly realized that, oh, what is happening the world over? For some, these are what we call precipitating factors that, tilt some people over the edge. In the early days of, the pandemic, and that there was a lockdown, there was this funny thing people were always saying, and it wasn't funny really, that, oh, most homes were breaking up because husbands are suddenly spending too much time with each other. They couldn't go anywhere. So before that, husband and wife would quarrel, and then the man could, storm out of the house, go and watch football with his friends, go out. The wife too could go to her friend's place, have girls day out and all that. That wasn't possible anymore because of the lockdown. So people were forced to be together, and it's either resulted in, them either becoming physically violent. So there was an increased rate of domestic violence, or some that, borrowed themselves sense, so to say, were able to now sit together and face the reality that, okay, let's deal with these issues that we are having. So people know now that, oh, they can seek professional help in dealing with the issues that they are experiencing when they are grieving about, a loss, whether it's from people surrounding them, their loved ones, their significant others, even their friends, they are not able to provide that support. So seeking professional help is not something that makes you look weak enough to, you know, seek help when you need it. How do you take care of yourself when you grieve? Like I said, grief is a natural process, and while there is no right or wrong way to do it, you must also learn certain things that you need to do while you are grieving, so that at the end of that grieving process, you come out a better person. It has happened. You are able to do what's hard for you to, you know, to move beyond that stage of your life. So the first thing you need to do is that you need to first take care of yourself. Self-love is very critical. Sometimes people blame themselves for the loss that they experience. So they begin to think about, oh, perhaps if they have done something different, no, it happens without it being that Allah had written it. Everything would happen at the exact time has been written, and there's really nothing we can do about it. So that in itself should give us a sense of comfort that no matter how hard we tried our best, that loss was going to happen. That death was going to come about. That job that we thought missed, you know. So it gives us a sense of comfort to know that it happened because it had been decreed. And so we've only played our part in it, whichever way. So it's important that we learn to take care of ourselves, so that emotionally we don't become too distressed that we cannot move on. And this means that we need to face our feelings. It's okay to grieve. It's even okay to mourn moderately. Islam, for instance, as Muslims, are not expected to, you know, maybe when a husband dies or, you know, we lose a loved one, we hit ourselves on the ground, we start rolling on the floor, crying, you know, and wailing hysterically, and, you know, saying stuff that we may even say things that we're not supposed to say, blaming who we shouldn't blame. No, that is not the way a Muslim mourns. We mourn in a realistic manner. We mourn in a way that, you know, we don't end up, you know, committing sin as Muslims, and we don't end up injuring ourselves, causing themselves harm. So when we face our feelings, it's not about us trying to suppress our grief. We can tone it down, but we can't avoid it. It's okay to grieve, like I've said. But in order for us to heal properly, we need to acknowledge that pain that we are going through. Tremendous loss. I feel tremendous pain. It to feel sad, you know. So there's nothing wrong about it. But we need to do it in moderation, like I said, so that it doesn't lead further to complications like, you know, us now going into depression. We know that depression is defined as, you know, a sadness that prolongs for more than 2 weeks. So when sadness becomes too prolonged, then we are falling into depression, and that is another kettle of fish on its own. So that we don't become overly anxious, you know. Now everything, we are tensed up, you know, we're always scared and all that, and we can't get that, you know, we can't get back to that sense of peace and tranquility. Or some of us, we may get into substance abuse to try to deal with the pain. So because they give them medication, and, you know, before you know it, they now depend on that medication before they can sleep or before they can do anything. And, you know, it just spirals into becoming addicted to certain psychoactive drugs and all that, which of course lead to different types of health problems. So we need to face our feelings. We also need to express those feelings in a tangible and creative way. For some people, it could be in the form of, you know, writing in a journal. You know, some people, they are able to, when they write down, it gives them a kind of relief. They're able to express their feelings. They put their foot in of them. They are sometimes acting. For some, is what their pain is about, where they are coming from. It's not about talking to somebody that will tell you, come off it. Are you the only person that has lost somebody? You know, sometimes we have those friends or those family members that when they come to you to grieve in quotes with you, they are bringing their own, you know, retinue of problems. They will tell you how they suffered even more than you are now. They'll tell you, you are lucky. Your husband died at age 55. Me, my husband died when he was just 30. I had a 9-month-old child. I had to suffer alone, you know. They are not helping you to go through. Whatever they went through is their own experience. And it doesn't in any way diminish the pain or the suffering that you are going through right now. So it's for you to know that, oh, this is the kind of person I can let into my world to express myself, because they would understand the pain that I'm going through, and they will help me, you know, heal properly. As much as possible, we also need to, you know, go back to our routine life. Yes, like my brother said, Islam allows us for most of the kind of grief that we suffer, maybe 3 days at most, even the death of a loved one, except perhaps just the, and because, okay, this was the closest person to the person that died, they want to see whether, okay, before the man died, the woman was not pregnant. So maybe that's why a woman is expected to, you know, mourn the husband for several months and all that. But even during that period, for some women, for instance, maybe if they are working and they need to, you know, continue working to be able to at least sustain the family and all that, they can start going to work after a certain period and all that. So as much as we can, we need to maintain what we used to do before, because that would also help us to transition quicker into, you know, normalcy when the grieving period is over. So yes, life may not always go back to being the same. We may never be able to go back to that boisterous, happy, cheerful person that we were. Particularly, I mean, if the loss is like the death of a loved one, you know, the wife may never become that happy, but it doesn't mean that she can't continue to live life to be happy, even if she's not expressing it. I know that sometimes our cultures expect these things of us. So they'll be like, if a woman starts to live her life the way she used to before her husband died, they may even begin to say, oh, I mean, that she killed the man and all that. So sometimes culture also plays a part in suppressing these things, in ensuring that, you know, this prolonged grieving process is perpetuated. It becomes a never-ending thing. And like I mentioned earlier, we need to plan ahead of grief. So we need to know the things that could trigger grief. We need to prepare. So for instance, if it's a loved one that has died, we know ahead times like anniversaries, either their birthdays, our wedding anniversaries, the time that maybe we had our children and all that. They are likely triggers of that grief, because we would always remember them by their absence. So we can help ourselves by preparing ahead of these things happening, so that, you know, we don't go back, we don't fall back into becoming an emotional wreck when these things happen. And of course, more importantly, we need to look after our physical health. A period of grieving is a time when we may usually not have time for ourselves. We are usually the last things on our mind. But like I said earlier, we need to take care of ourselves first, because after that grieving period, life must continue. So as much as possible, we must ensure that we take care of our physical health too. And alhamdulillah, like I said, as Muslims, Islam has, you know, fashioned out this thing for us in a beautiful way, because we know that our bodies have a right over us. So we are not going to neglect ourselves. We are not expected to neglect ourselves, even though, you know, we have suffered a significant loss. So while it's okay to mourn, it's okay to grieve, it's okay to, you know, to give in to the trauma that we may be feeling, we also have to have it at the back of our mind that Islam is a religion of moderation, and You know, there's a way that is neither to the two extremes that we do things. So we don't shake our body and just get up and pretend like nothing has happened without going through that normal grieving process. Neither do we allow the grief to so encompass us that we are not able to move further in life. And I guess I think my time, I'll stop here, and whatever I didn't get to say, perhaps if it comes out in the question and answer, I'll be able to address it. Once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's my mommy. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. You have done very well in giving us such a lot of information about the practical ways, identifying the types of symptoms, and you know, all of the things that you have just shared with us today. May Allah reward you. Jazakumullahu khairan. And when I say that as my mom, she's my big mommy in the field. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We have so many questions for you. So many questions here, but inshallah, we will get through them as well as and as quickly as we can. So someone here says, how do you deal with grief when you are not very expressive? There are people who have a huge problem seeking any sort of help or even talking to people. So how do you advise that they let go of some of these thoughts? Would you like to take this question, Ma, or will Jubril? I think you should take it. I think you should take this one. Bismillah.
Okay, sorry, I forgot I was on mute. I was trying to.
Okay.
You know, I mentioned that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please, Ma. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, Ma. I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Right. You know, this is one of the factors. I said that our personality is one of the factors that affect how we grieve. So somebody that is not able to express themselves, of course, that is an indication of the kind of personality. Perhaps that person is an introvert, you know, and if such personalities could also now become worsened if they have experienced, they've had life experiences that encourage that kind of behavior. So it's one thing for them to have that kind of personality. It's another thing for, you know, the kind of card life deals them to ensure that, to aggravate those personality traits. So perhaps the person has suffered loss at some point and they tried to open up. And, you know, like I said, people will tell them, are you the only one that lost your dad? You know, come off it, get over it. You should be strong enough. So what that triggers in their mind emotionally and psychologically is that they shouldn't talk about their grief. They should suffer in silence, because every time they try to, you know, to talk about it, the people around them, perhaps unknowingly, perhaps innocently, they shut them down. They didn't let them, you know, grieve openly. And so such people, you know, I also mentioned that sometimes we may realize that the people around us, our family and friends, they may not be equipped to help us deal with what we are going through. And this is where seeking professional help may come in. So we need to understand that seeking professional help is not a sign of weakness. Sometimes it can make the difference. And yes, they are unable to talk. But as professionals, we have, you know, different techniques that we can use to get them to talk. We have, you know, what hypnotherapy, that when people are put on hypnosis, for instance, they are taken back to phases in their lives that they didn't even remember, that they had suppressed for so long, but they are able to come out and share those feelings, those pains that they've been going through. And inshallah, they begin to experience significant positive difference. So so that you first of all even get over that initial trauma and pain that you are going through, then you can now be taught the skills that you need to be able to express yourself. It is that these skills are teachable. You can learn them and become better person. Even if you are at the extreme end of the introversion scale. If introversion is your personality, you can learn to open up to these are skills that can be learned, inshallah. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma, for answering that question. We have someone here that has his hand raised. Engineer Raji, I will unmute you so that you can answer your question, inshallah. I hope that you are still with us. Engineer Oyekon, my apologies, please. Please go ahead with your question. Engineer
Oyekon. Person on mute, maybe you need to unmute them.
Okay, maybe he has a problem on muting. We can come back to him, inshallah. Okay, so let's go
Can you unmute him? Yes. Can you unmute him?
Right, I think I've done that.
All right.
Okay, so another question, Ma. Please, can you provide names, both male and females, for Islamic grief counselors? That's a tough one.
Exactly. I'm not very sure we have counselors that are, that's specifically focused on grief counseling and all that. But I know that a lot of us professionals, because it's part of our training, so people who are trained in counseling are also able to provide grief counseling. But if for any reason anybody has a need to see a counselor, it's also important that you put a lot of other things into perspective. Today, most of us seek someone, a simple Google search, or even sometimes when you see somebody first, you are talking to a counselor. I know we do refer ourselves. So if somebody comes to me, for instance, with a problem that I know that is not my core area of focus, maybe because I've not been doing it in my private practice and all that, then I'm quick to refer the person to someone that I know does it. And sometimes, because we have a platform, we could just ask, oh, please, who does my help? That oh, this person is specialized in grief counseling. But I know that, okay, for us to our imam, because our faith is our first anchor that we reach out for. So it's also important that we are knowledgeable enough to even know the kind of imam we would go to. Sometimes when we go to our clergy, they would end up compounding the problem for us. So alhamdulillah, right now we're also having increased number of of counseling as part of their job description. So we need to begin to be aware of these things and create more awareness within the Muslim community, so that those of us that are in counseling and perhaps we don't have the required skills can begin to learn it and be able to offer this kind of critical help to the Ummah, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. All right, so I have a question here that I would like Mr. Saba to answer. Sir, what is Islam's stance on grieving and praying for a non-Muslim parent or sibling?
Thank you very much. So, unfortunately for a non-Muslim parent or sibling, we're not allowed to make dua for them, like for forgiveness and things like that after they have passed on. If it was permissible, Allah would have granted this to the Prophet ﷺ for his own parents, and he would have granted it to Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam for his own parents, and he did in fact ask, and Allah said no to him. So unfortunately, if they died on the path of disbelief, we're not allowed to make dua for them. They're left with Allah's judgment, and Allah alone is wise. He alone knows what he will do on the day of judgment. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Can women visit graves? Also, what if she's pregnant?
Okay. You want me to answer that?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Inshallah, women can visit the graves. The complication is with following the funeral procession. There is a clear hadith that prevents women from following the funeral procession at the time of the janaz. However, culturally, this is not something that is strictly adhered to. And I think it's one of those areas of grieving where people are not able to get closure because they weren't there to see. But be that as it may, Islam does not allow the women to follow the bear. In my experience as an imam, there is no way you can stop a person if they say they want to go with the procession to bury their brother or to bury their father or their husband. Allah knows best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant ease to the hearts of such people. But women can visit the graves. Initially, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited the visiting of graves completely for all men and women. But later, he in one of his other traditions, he made it permissible because he said it is something that would help us to remember death frequently. And in the reminder around death, we will make amends to our conduct and focus on the things that would earn us Jannah. So the visiting of the graves is really more for our benefit, if you think about it, than the benefit of those who are already dead. And as for whether or not a pregnant woman can visit the graves, I have not seen anything in the text that prohibits this. So I would say at this point, and I stand to be corrected, that a pregnant woman is a woman and should be able to visit the graves because I've not seen any such qualifications. Wallahu alam.
Allahu alam. Thank you, sir. Ma, this is a question for you, please. Can we talk about situations where people have trauma or loss that has built up? Previous losses, they did not grieve, and then more like a huge one. How do they cope with this? How do they deal with all of this without losing it? I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I got logged out and reconnected again, so I didn't know. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I said, I touched briefly on it in answering the question about someone who is not able to express themselves. Yes, sometimes we find out that people suffer, different forms of, loss comes in different forms, like I said. So somebody that has moved from school or moved from home, or lost their job, they've experienced one form of loss or the other. So whether that loss was traumatic or not, I also try to explain what traumatic loss is. That is usually the one that happened suddenly without warning and may have a bit of violence involved or significant damage. So the person may have been experiencing one form of loss or the other, and the more they are unable to express themselves, to grieve properly with each loss, it builds up. These are emotional issues we are dealing with. So they were not able to properly grieve the last loss. Another one has come. So it builds up. It makes even grieving for this current one harder because it takes them back to the earlier loss that they haven't even dealt with properly. So it gets to a point where we call, it becomes either a precipitating factor or a predisposing over the head. So on an individual basis, we need to begin to be aware. For so many of us that may be here and listening to this now, we can go back and think, oh, does this sound like something that's happened to me, or that's like something that I'm experiencing, so that we know how to quickly reach out and seek help. If we don't properly for one loss, it's going to affect how we deal with, our life. We're going to have to deal with several forms of loss. That is a reality. So we need to also help ourselves by reaching out when we know that, oh, this thing, I've been going through several losses that I haven't been able to deal with. Let me reach out in case I'm not able to do it myself. Well,
thank you for that response. We have so many comments in the chat and Q&A alike. Thank you all for participating. We have Sister Omoda Adenua who is asking for a part 2 of this session. Inshallah, we'll definitely consider this internally and let you know via our Instagram pages and everyone else in our community, inshallah. We have someone who says, Sister Ghaneeyyah, thank you for that bit about immunity. At least now I know why I have been eating like a thief. All right. Okay. So, alhamdulillah. So, Brother Jubril, would you like to take this question, sir, that says, on mourning for 3 days, please, could you shed more light concerning the fidal prayers, 3, 5, 7 days, or none at all?
Thank you. So what we have evidence for in the text is mourning for Ayyam al-Thalatha, 3 days. There are cultures where people have other mourning rites, 7th day, 40th day, and things that seem to have been integrated with Islam. I'm not competent enough to talk about the historical perspective of how all of that came to be, but I know for a fact that as part of coming to practices in different areas with Islam, certain things are permissible on the basis of custom, urf. And that's why you could go from one country to the other and you see certain practices and you think to yourself, does Islam permit this? Does Islam not permit this? It's only those who've studied the fiqh and understand the usul, the techniques, that can then come and advise on, how did this get integrated and is it permissible or not permissible? But in the traditional text, there is nothing that speaks to mourning or sitting in groups beyond the 3rd day. At the end of the 3rd day, everybody disperses as much as possible. You try to get the family and the people back into their regular rhythm of life so that there is no constant, consistent reminder. But having said that, if what you are gathering for is to make prayers for the repose of the soul of the dead, because part of Sadaqatul Jariyah is that the continuing Sadaqah that a dead person benefits from is a child, a righteous child that continues to pray for them. And if the child calls people together to pray for their late departed parent, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Part of it is a beneficial sadaqah that the person did in their lifetime, or knowledge that they taught people and other people are learning from. So if you do some acts of sadaqah, of charity, in memory of the person, with the hope in Allah that they would benefit from this where they are, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But in the Sunnah, we do not see anything of these practices of like the 7th day fidal, the 40th day, 1 year remembrance, 2nd year remembrance, not at all. Wallahu alam.
Wallahu alam. Okay, so we have more questions here. I think this is a follow-up to a previous question. How long should a menopausal woman stay home for mourning, since it is said for detecting if a woman is pregnant or not, since it is said it is for the, I'm not sure I follow. How long should a menopausal woman stay home for mourning, since it is said that it is for detecting if a woman is pregnant or not? I don't know if you understand this question, Sheikh, but I'm not sure.
Sheikh. Not Sheikh, please. No, so I understand it. In some of the text around the subject of idda, which is the waiting period, either for a widow or someone who is divorced, 3 months in the case of the person who is divorced, 4 months, 10 days in the case of the person who is a widow. It is said that part of the wisdom is that the husband that left the one who's divorced, or the husband that departed the world, there is no way of knowing if the person had taken in before they died or before they got divorced. So the waiting period, part of the wisdom is that in time you'll be able to see if they indeed took in, the pregnancy would be visible and there will be no arguments about who the father of the child is. It's just one of many reasons. Allah does not preclude menopausal women from observing the iddah. Allah is alim al-ghaib wa shahada. When he gives a ruling, is the knower of all that is hidden and what is witnessed. There must be a variety of other reasons why he has prescribed this to us, and he only wants the best for us at all times. So in one context, what the person is saying follows some logic, but the reason this thing about the person may be pregnant is just one of the many reasons why women are told to observe iddah.
Right. Okay.
But of course, like my sister qualified it, it's also dependent on whether the person is able to stay indoors and still be able to fend for themselves. If the person has work to go to, as a means of livelihood, there is no other way, no other recourse to supporting them during this period, then it's permissible for them to go out during the day.
Right. All right, sir. I think that answers the question. We have someone whose hand is raised. Okay. There is no name here, but it's in numbers. Once again, if you would like to ask your question vocally without typing it, please, you are allowed to do so, and we will get to you as soon as you are back online with us. Okay.
I also want to speak to the question, if you don't mind, around mourning and tears.
Right.
Again, the difference between mourning and grieving. The mourning is actually the externalization of the process of grieving, and in that, and it's not just tears that express mourning. You can, in grief, you can shed tears. So you can cry beyond the 3 days that is recommended. There are times when you may become a bit sad when you remember the person who you lost, or in the case of a lost limb, there is a constant reminder that the limb is not there. Maybe your house got burnt, maybe you lost property, you lost a child. There will be times after the 3 days when you would remember these things and you would feel some grief in your heart, and maybe you're moved to tears or some other means of, because remember, grieving is about the inner state. It's never about what's happening outside. It's a person's own inner process. And that's why it's difficult to condole, to console a person who is grieving. That's why it takes skilled people, skilled, trained counselors who can be with them, who can help them through the process. And because we have no way of knowing what is inside a person, what it brings out, we have no control over as external people. So the person may shed tears a year after, 2 years after, 10 years after the loss, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with us grieving, alhamdulillah, for the opportunity to be Muslims. I think that is all of the questions in the chat.
It's 18 hours.
Someone, EIOG, mentions that at the end of your lecture, there were some points or topics that you wanted to touch on. I don't know if you've been able to do so, sir, within the course of the Q&A. Since we have a little bit of time, maybe you could go ahead, please, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there are a couple of things. There was a dua I wanted to share from the hadith, Salahumma inni abduka abd. Ibn Abdik, O Allah, I am your servant, son of your servant, a prayer for distress. I've put it in the chat room. There is a bit of commentary around it in Ibn Qayyum's Fawaid, but that's going to be a subject for another day, because we can draw certain lessons from this dua as to what our relationship with loss should be. But that will be something for another day. The second was I wanted to make sure I speak about Sadaqah Tujariyah, so we know how we can help those of our believing parents, loved ones who have gone to meet their creator, and we've spoken about that in the Q&A. I wanted to speak about visiting the graveside. It came up on the Q&A and we've spoken about it. Part of the sunnah of visiting the graveside is the dua that we make for the people who are in the graves. Peace be upon you all, O inhabitants of the graves, amongst the believers and the Muslims. Verily, we will, Allah willing, be united with you. We ask Allah for well-being for us and you. And then you walk in. There are no prescriptions around, oh, you must read Surah Yasin, or you must have a long conversation with them. We don't see any evidence for any of this sort of like practices. I see somebody's hand up. But I would, interestingly, somebody put up Yahya Qayyum. There is a dua from the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu collected by Anas ibn Malik, where he says, a prayer to ask Allah for relief from distress is Yahya Qayyum bi rahmatika astaghith. O living, O eternal Lord, in your mercy do I seek refuge. And the final bit I want to mention, and this was spoken about by my sister, may Almighty Allah continue to increase her in wisdom and grant her a long and useful life, is the issue of statements like "if only," "I should," "I ought to," "I could have," which is the constant refrain of the one who is racked with guilt when they are grieving, because the grieving process brings a great deal of self-recrimination, self-judgment. You may think it's your fault. You may think there's something you should have done that you didn't do. You may think some action of yours brought about this thing. And the Prophet ﷺ, in one of the hadiths of faith, you'll find this in Sahih Muslim, number 2664, hadith 2664, where the Prophet ﷺ said, and Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported this, the strong believer is more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, but there is goodness in both of them. وَفِي كُلِّ خَيْرٍ. There's goodness in both of them. Be eager for what benefits you, seek help from Allah, and do not be frustrated. احرصوا على ما ينفعك ويستعين بالله ولا تعجز. Be eager for what benefits you, seek help from Allah, and do not be frustrated. If something befalls you, وَإِنْ أَصَابَكَ شَيْءٌ, then you do not say, فَلَا تَقُولُوا لَوْ أَنِي فَعَلْتُ كَانَّ كَذَا وَكَذَا. If only I had done something else, if only I had done this or that. Rather, وَلَكِنْ, instead, قُل, say, قَدَرُ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ. Say this instead: Allah has decreed what He wills. فَآلَ فَإِنَّ لَوْ تَفْتَهُ أَمَلَ شَيْطَانٍ. Because the phrase "law," if only, I should, I ought, I could, opens up the way for the work of shaitan. And it's shaitan that then comes in and start casting doubt on your faith. And then people stop praying, people stop making their salat because they feel maybe they've fallen short of Allah's mercy, or they feel they've been judged harshly, or they take Allah to be an enemy, subhanallah. So these statements of I should, I could, I ought to, are things that we must help somebody who's grieving to overcome, and find ways to help them reframe these, because otherwise it's a very slippery slope. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. If you don't mind, we have one more person who is raising his or her hand. Galaxy J4, you have been permitted to ask your question. Bismillah.
He's muted. Can you unmute him? Maybe he doesn't know how to do it.
Hello, you can please go ahead and speak. We have permitted you to speak from our end. But if you're having challenges, you may also type your question.
Okay.
I think
Sophia,
that would be our last question.
I saw a question that I think I want to just quickly address.
Okay, please go ahead,
Yeah.
Ma.
It was a question about if somebody had suffered trauma or abuse from the person that they lost, and if the person wants to know if talking about it will not be considered as speaking ill of the dead or something. I think that was the question. Did you notice that in the?
Okay, right. I just saw
Yes,
it
yeah.
coming. Alhamdulillah. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I think from a professional perspective, it's important that that person seeks help professionally. This is not the is a dicey situation, you know, particularly looking at it from speaking ill of the dead. People may first say, why did you wait until that person died before you spoke out? But because it's a trauma, obviously that person hasn't dealt with it. And now suffering the loss of the abuser without having been able to deal with it is like a double, you know, it brings about further pain, because now it's like that person has escaped your ever confronting them. So I would advise that person to seek help first from a professional, so that they are able to speak to the professional objectively. They will be assured that they will not be reprimanded or blamed. Yes, it doesn't matter if they were unable to open up when that person was alive. A trauma or a loss felt, there is no time frame to it. Whenever you are strong enough, you are bold enough to come out, is the right time. So that person should seek professional help so that he or she can deal with the pain of the trauma first. Then if it's also important that they now address it with maybe family members, to let other people know, oh, this was what this person did to me while they were alive. If it's part of their healing process, the professional would also be able to help them, either let them know, okay, it's okay to do that, or get them to a state where it doesn't matter if they tell others, as long as they are able to heal. So I just thought that I should mention that. But please let the person seek help. It's very important.
Right. So, Ma, you are saying that when it comes to speaking ill of the dead, this is not what that means, or this does not count?
It's a trauma that the person is experiencing. So I was speaking from this professional perspective. I don't know what the Islamic perspective on that is. Perhaps Brad Jubril will be able to help us. Maybe there's an Islamic way to deal with, oh, somebody did something bad to you. But in fact, looking at it, if in Islam, somebody that is owing you money, if they die, you are expected to tell the family members, this person. So abuse, I want to believe that somebody that abused you, whether emotionally or physically, that's even something worse than owing money. So perhaps it may not really matter, but let Brad Jubril address that from the Islamic perspective.
Thank you, Ma.
My sister is 100% spot on. For the one who has been oppressed, and this is where maybe the training for our imams on counseling and things comes in. They could talk to an imam about this, but first they must monitor their intention as to, why am I coming out with this? If your reason for coming forward with this is because you fear that if you do not forgive them, this then becomes something that may make the person bankrupt on the day of judgment, that you may get up and seek from Allah that Allah should, give you your right from them, then it's okay for you to speak to an imam that helps you to get through the process and completely forgive and pardon the person. But if your intention, and you have to be very careful with this because shaitan is very powerful, if your intention is to make known something that Allah in his infinite wisdom has, you know, caused not to be known to others at the time of the incident. And that is all you seek, that people should come to know how terrible this person is. And you have no desire in your heart to move towards forgiveness, to request for help on how you can overcome this, then the blame is on you. And I ask you to fear Allah in that case. And that's all I can say on the subject.
Thank you.
There are a couple of things in the Q&A I want to address very quickly, please. It's not the right session for it, but somebody keeps asking about the idda period for someone, for a lady who is divorced. It is part of the fiqh of marriage and divorce. There is a waiting period during which the husband can still come back and the two can be reconciled. There are so many things that happen in that period. Where do they spend this time? The husband has to provide for this. The husband who is desiring to separate from them has to provide where they stay in that period, preferably in the same potentially house where they married them into. But the responsibility for providing for her in that period is not something that is waived for him because they've announced a divorce. And if at any time they come back together for whatever reason, if they have conjugal relations, then that either period is done. We have to start another one if for any reason they're not able to reconcile after that. And after the third time of that sort of incident, then their coming together is nullified, regardless of what's going on. But the short answer, yes, she has a waiting period, the one who's separating from the husband. It's 3 months. It's in the house with the husband, a place provided by the husband seeking to separate from her. And she's not allowed to take new marriage proposals in that period also. Wallahu alam.
Okay. All right, sir. So final question, inshallah. And if you don't mind, I would like you to take this one. Oluyombo says, I lost an upper limb in February due to medical negligence. I'm still grieving up till now. The pain is unquantifiable. How do I get out of this? Did you get that, Ma? Or shall I read it again?
Oh, okay. I thought you said, I was actually responding to it. So I thought it was Brad Jubril you were talking to. Okay. Yeah, I saw the question and I was responding. I was actually typing. Yeah. I don't know if it's a brother or sister. I was just typing that first, I'm so sorry about your loss. May Allah comfort you. But I now went on to say that you should first seek physical therapy to help you deal with that pain, and you'll be taught how to live with the loss of the part of your body, so that you can learn to adjust accordingly. And then more importantly, you can also seek psychological help. If it's something, maybe when you are ready, you can get in touch with me, and I can help you through some sessions to help you deal with the psychological trauma that expectedly you'll be feeling from the loss of your aunt. May Allah grant you support, and may He continue to protect you. So sorry.
Amen. Amen. Jazakumullahu khairan. What a session. We have had all sorts of questions and we've been able to answer so many of them. And inshallah, we hope that this has been able to give us more information and more knowledge on grieving and loss in Islam. Jazakumullahu khairan to our dear panelists, Brother Jubril Saba, who has been a pillar of support and a constant a speaker at the Tahara Collective. Jazakumullahu khairan to Mrs. Ghaneeyyah Sulaiman-Olokodana, clinical psychologist and our resident psychologist as well, inshallah. We hope you would come around for more of our sessions. Thank you all our attendees and participants for staying with us all through and up till now. I would also like to further announce, like I said before, that this session has been recorded or is being recorded, we will put it up on our YouTube and share the link via our email. That's if you are not on our mailing list, please join the mailing list via the link in the chat box so that you can get a recording. We also have our Instagram page, so you can be on the lookout for our sessions, inshallah, because we have people asking that when can they attend more sessions. So that is how to stay informed. Thank you once again. Sister Ghaneeyyah, do you mind giving us a closing dua, as is our tradition here at the Tahara Collective? Bismillah.
Indeed, all praise belongs to Almighty Allah. We thank Him for today. We thank Him for the opportunity to gather, even if it's virtually, to share knowledge and ideas as Muslims and as humans. We thank Him for all we have learned. We thank Him for the wisdom He has given to us, the speakers, and also to the benefit of learning that He has given to the participants. May He make the knowledge shared beneficial to each and every one of us. May He forgive us of our shortcomings, wherever we have erred in what we have said. May He forgive us and overlook our errors, and may He make those that heard us understand it even better than we intended. And we pray for the Ummah as a whole. We know that we are also going through one form of grief or the other, one form of trauma or the other. Allah heal all of us individually, whatever is in our hearts that is paining us, that is a source of constant grief. May He grant us succor, may He grant us comfort, and may He heal the world of the affliction that is communally engulfing all of us. We continue to ask Him for guidance, we continue to ask Him for protection, and we pray for the organizers too. May Allah continue to accept this from you as an act of ibadah and continue to make His our affairs. Once again, I ask Allah for forgiveness for myself and for each and every one of us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's close with
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.